Let's stay with violence against women and children and ask, how does a parent grieve for a child? A case in point is the two children in Orange Farm whose bodies were recently found meters apart, naked. A woman has been charged for their murders, but how on earth do parents deal with the trauma? To discuss this, I'm joined by counselling psychologist Gordon Shaw. He's joining us by Skype. Gordon, good to have you on the show. Devastating, of course, conversation or circumstances under which we're having this conversation. The loss of a child, of course, is a terrible thing at any time, but when it's in such a violent way with so many unanswered questions, where does a parent begin to process the loss?
So I think, Thembekile, this is an unfortunate circumstance to see happen again time after time, and even talking about it is quite painful because many people, as we've seen in the previous story, want justice. But in order to kind of go about grieving a loss of a loved one, especially under these circumstances, which are so complex and so difficult to deal with, you know, no parent would ever consider losing their child and losing their child in this way. You know, some reports have suggested muti killings and for muti purposes and so on. You know, whatever the truth may be around this, no parent ever expects to lose the loss of their child, and with that comes a profound sense or lack thereof of purposeness. You know, when you become a parent, this becomes everything for you, and so it becomes incredibly difficult just from the outset just to accept the loss of your child.
To what extent, Gordon, does the criminal justice process compound the pain, the grief for the parent?
So I think, you know, this is often a topic of controversy because we see that in communities themselves want to take corrective measures to discipline perpetrators of violence, whether it's you know, against women or children for that matter. And you know, in defense of the criminal justice system, of course, they want to put together a prolific case against someone to be able to try them in court, make them stand trial, and of course, give the victims or the survivors thereof the opportunity to see that person go to jail. But this process often takes an extended length and period of time, and it can be very disheartening to see nothing get done, at least from the victim's perspective.
And is there a great deal of help, Gordon, for parents who are, A, mourning a child, going through a criminal process? Do they get a lot of help along the way from police, the prosecutors, and indeed the court system itself?
So, I mean, I can only speak from my experience, but I think overall we lack the public services and the infrastructure to be able to deal with violence on this type of scale, and even to provide the necessary resources for the people that need it the most. And you know, when I talk about victims, I'm really talking about people who have experienced violence, because victims as a word itself can be very stigmatizing towards you know, people who have experienced this. And often we find re-traumatization and re-victimization, which often deters people who really want to see justice take place from even entering into the court system, which is the unfortunate truth and reality that we have to face, not only as South Africans, but as a society as a whole.
For those of us then who are either a neighbor, a relative, a friend of a couple or a single parent who's lost a child to crime or in many of the other violent instances in South Africa, people battle with what to say, what to do, how to be there for the bereaved person or the family. How do we do that? Where do we start?
So I think, you know, we have many different cultural expectations of how to grieve. Women are expected to cry and to mourn openly their child or a loved one's death, whereas men should behave in a more aggressive or angry prone kind of disposition. And this is, of course, not the case. What we need to understand is that we all grieve in our own ways and in a way that is culturally appropriate for us, whether it involves rituals, whether it involves celebrations of the person's life, that we need to celebrate and understand, you know, how a person needs to process their grief in a way that feels right for them. And so just giving them support is often the first step towards doing that. being with them, encouraging them to talk about the loss of their loved ones, as well as the special memories that they've had with them. And of course, that's an opportunity where if you've had a close relationship with that person to share the same thing.
Psychologist Gordon Shaw, thank you so much for speaking to us on South Africa Tonight.